Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. Where is Peng Shuai? We first asked this question on the 3rd of November, a day after Peng shared her story of sexual assault and abuse in China. And since then, we've been asking this question almost every day. Where is Peng Shuai? The campaign gained momentum. Tennis stars across the world spoke up. Tennis associations spoke up. Countries spoke up. The United Nations also woke up and spoke up. China finally had to respond, and it did so with propaganda and falsehoods. A fake letter saying Peng is fine, videos to show that she is alive. Even roping in the International Olympic Association did. But we have a very simple question tonight. Why is the Chinese state media speaking for Peng Shuai? Why can't she speak for herself? And we also answer. That's because this is a farce. Orchestrated appearances and fake statements to silence the world. It is not helping Beijing. The questions are not going away. If anything, they're growing louder and more questions are being added. Like, what will it take for the world to boycott the Olympics in China, the Genocide Games? Will the world participate even after China practically holds an Olympian hostage? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss. Also on the show, is Russia preparing to invade Ukraine? Why has it amassed 100,000 soldiers on the border? We'll bring you the US assessment and the latest from the ground. In Europe, Wuhan virus cases shoot up in the fifth wave as governments reimpose lockdowns, protests intensify against restrictions and vaccines. In Pakistan, the backlash against Chinese projects in the port city of Gwadar is growing. We bring you a ground report. And in the US, one verdict has divided the country. We'll tell you what's the Rittenhouse case and why has it left America more divided than ever before. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Protests in Sudan continue despite a deal to reinstate the deposed Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. Demonstrators clashed with the police, demanding the military must fully withdraw from the government. The Sri Lankan High Court has started the first of the 3 trials connected to the 2019 Easter bombings, which killed nearly 300 people. The former national police chief has been charged with failing to act on repeated intelligence warnings of a possible terror attack. The former defense secretary Hema Siri Fernando faces similar charges. The Taliban in Afghanistan have issued a new religious guideline calling on the country's television channels to stop showing dramas and soap operas featuring women actors. The Taliban also called on women television journalists to wear hijabs. Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has accused the European Union of refusing to discuss the fate of 2,000 migrants who wish to go to Europe and remain stranded. 5 people were killed and at least 40 others injured after a vehicle plowed through barricades and into a Christmas parade in the U.S. state of Wisconsin.
New homes and buildings to have EV charging points.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said Britain will make electric car chargers compulsory for new buildings in England as it switches away from high-polluting vehicles. South Africa's last apartheid president, F.W. de Klerk, was laid to rest at a private funeral service in Cape Town. De Klerk passed away on November 11th after a long battle with cancer. Thousands of people have been evacuated after heavy rainfall triggered flash floods in the western town of Medio Baudo in Colombia. According to local media, a total of 3,600 families were affected by intense flooding. Germany's Alexander Zverev has become the first active player outside the big three of Djokovic, Nadal and Federer to win more than one ATP Tour Finals crown. The Olympic champion turned around a 5-match losing streak against world number 2 Daniil Medvedev with a clinical 6-4, 6-4 victory in the final in Turin. He had previously won this tournament in 2018. French Sports Minister Roxana Maracineanu has said that repeated crowd troubles are putting the future of French football at risk. The high-profile match between Lyon and Marseille on Sunday had to be abandoned after Dimitri Payet was hit in the head by a bottle thrown from the stands. Several other matches have also been marred by fan violence, and the sports and interior ministries will meet over the matter on Tuesday.
Where is Peng Shuai? For almost 3 weeks now, we've been asking this question, where is Peng Shuai? Exactly 20 days ago, she said that Zhang Gaoli, the former vice premier of China, had sexually assaulted her. Then, Peng Shuai suddenly disappeared. For 2 weeks, nobody heard from her. The world started asking questions, demanding proof that she's safe, alive. Last week, China released a sham letter, a retraction concocted in Peng's name, and released in a fake email by CGTN, China's state mouthpiece. This letter was circulated heavily to kill the story of Peng's disappearance. A cursor exposed China's lie. It wasn't an email after all. It was the screenshot of a Word document. Nobody believed that Peng wrote it. The pressure on China intensified. The world asked again, this time more assertively, where is Peng Shuai? In response, China came up with another charade. 2 videos were released from Beijing. Here is the first one. There you see Peng sitting at a restaurant, apparently surrounded by friends. This is the first video that China released to show the world that she's fine. 10 hours later, another video emerged. In this one, Peng Shuai is at a tennis match. She signed some tennis balls for fans. Now, we cannot confirm when this happened. When did Peng Shuai visit that restaurant? When did she meet these fans? It's hard to say. It's hard to verify, and China won't tell us. Did Peng want to make these appearances, or was she made to go for the filming of these videos? You might never know for sure, because there were no reporters there. No one was there to ask her about the sexual assault. The whole world is talking about China's biggest Me Too scandal right now. But inside China, this conversation is not allowed. Peng Shuai herself has not said a word about it since she made the allegations on the 2nd of November. China is hoping that the silence will make the story go away, and that these choreographed appearances will stop the questions. Here is the third one in the series. It happened today. Peng Shuai had a video call. She spoke to International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach. The IOC, International Olympic Committee, now insists that Peng Shuai is safe. If she is, why can't she post on Weibo again? Why can't she speak about the trauma she suffered? And why is the Chinese state media speaking on her behalf? Why can't Peng Shuai do all of this herself? Because she's not free. She's being paraded and videographed to bail Beijing out. Peng Shuai is a hostage of the Chinese state. She may not be locked up like a prisoner, but she's shackled nonetheless. The Chinese state is dictating what she can and cannot do. And this flurry of propaganda is supposed to be proof of lies. Once again, no one is buying Chinese lies. Even the United Nations now wants answers from China. They want to know, where is Peng Shuai?
What we would say is that it would be important to have proof of her whereabouts and well-being, and we would urge that there be an investigation with full transparency into allegations, into her allegations of sexual assault.
That demand was made last Friday. Now, tennis officials are stepping up pressure on China. The Women's Tennis Association put out a statement. They too have been wanting to speak to Peng Shuai, but they still can't reach her. Let me tell you what they thought of that video call with the IOC. This is the World Tennis Association, Women's Tennis Association, WTA, and this is what they've said. This video does not change our call for a full, fair and transparent investigation without censorship into her allegation of sexual assault, which is the issue that gave rise to our initial concern. By the way, the IOC statement made no mention of the sexual assault. The only thing that the rest of the world cares about, that the rest of the world is talking about. Isn't that strange? You release a statement on the safety of a player who disappeared after making sexual assault charges, and that's the one thing you leave out of your conversation. Is the IOC trying to protect China? What's in it for them? Well, they're hosting the Beijing Games next year. We'll talk about that in just a bit. For the moment, let me tell you this. Unlike the IOC, the tennis world is not afraid to talk about what happened with Peng Shuai. They stand united in their support for her. Tennis stars are now speaking out. Here's what Roger Federer said, and I'm quoting. She's one of our tennis champions, a former world #1, and clearly it's concerning. I've been on tour for 20 to 25 years, and I love the tour. I love the people that are there. They're special. The players as well, and she's one of them. Here's what Rafael Nadal said. The most important thing is to find out whether she's okay. All of us in the tennis family hope to see her back with us soon. And it's not just the players and sports bodies. Even governments are demanding answers. The United States is deeply concerned, it says about Peng. The United Kingdom wants quote-unquote verifiable evidence of her whereabouts and safety. France has issued a threat to China. Allow Peng to speak or face diplomatic consequences.
Are we not sure she is alive at this very moment?
Let's hear about it. She has died apparently. And if it's not the case, we'll let her speak.
Would, as the Americans said, France be ready to not send any official representatives to the upcoming Olympic Games in China?
Let her first speak, and if she's prevented from that, or if it's the case that she has disappeared, then this would lead to diplomatic consequences on our part.
Which consequences?
You will see then.
So what will China do now? Will it still behave as if nothing has happened? Well, from the looks of it, it will. It still does not want to admit that there's a problem to start with. Its wolf warrior diplomats are still sidestepping all questions on Peng Shuai. Here's Zhao Lijian, China's wolf warrior-in-chief, saying this is not a diplomatic matter.
What I have to tell you is that this indeed is not a diplomatic matter. As you will have noticed, she has appeared in public events recently. Next question.
Don't ask me about it. Move to the next question. That's how Zhao Lijian deals with charge of sexual assault against a senior Communist Party leader. Every time it comes up, he says it's irrelevant. What does this tell you? Beijing is desperately trying to protect a sexual predator, and they seem to have found an ally in the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. Now, it's a shame of Olympic proportions. So China is holding a tennis star hostage. The world is not being able to do anything about it. I understand we cannot board a flight to China and start looking for Peng Shuai, but here's something that we can do, all of us. Set an example. Set an example for China so that it knows it can no longer get away with such crimes. How do we do that? It's actually very simple. Boycotting the upcoming Genocide Games. 4th February 2022. That's when Beijing hosts the Winter Olympics. After exporting a pandemic and profiting from it, after carrying out a genocide and practically imprisoning an Olympian, Beijing wants the honor of hosting the Winter Olympics. And that's not even the most amusing part of it. Here's what's funny. Countries are willing to participate in China's Genocide Games. Not a single country has boycotted the Beijing Olympics, not one. Sure, the US is pledging a diplomatic boycott. Sure, the UK too has similar plans. Canada too is reportedly discussing a diplomatic boycott. But how does it even help? What precisely is the point of not sending ministers when you're happily sending flights filled with athletes to China? And this is a country that the West jointly sanctioned over the Uyghur genocide. Where is that activism now? The Olympics are supposed to promote international cooperation. Has the world forgotten that China has not cooperated one bit on the Wuhan virus probe? The Olympics celebrate peace. Has the world forgotten that China's aggression threatens peace in the region and beyond? The Olympics are a festival of friendship. Can countries like the US still claim to be Taiwan's friends after participating in China's genocide games? The Olympics are a celebration of human achievement, and China is a serial abuser of human rights. Beijing has violated every provision in the UN Genocide Convention. It has put over 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps. With them are Kazakhs and members from other minority communities. Women are being raped in Xinjiang's camps. There are reports of organ harvesting, forced sterilization, IUD insertions. People are disappearing in China. This country is guilty of oppression, systemic abuse. And these games, the Winter Olympics, they are Beijing's way of sports washing its crimes. I'm surprised that the world is willing to be party to this PR stunt. Here's what countries should do instead. Boycott the genocide games. And it is possible, yes, there is precedent. Games have been boycotted in the past. Take the 1980 Moscow Olympics, for example. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979. So when the Soviet Union hosted Olympics 1 year later, 62 countries did not show up in protest. 62. Then in the year 1976, the games were held in Montreal. 26 African countries missed it. Why? Because New Zealand was participating in these games and the Kiwis had just played rugby with South Africa, who the African countries had isolated over racism. They took a stand. In 1964, the International Olympics Committee banned South Africa from participating in the Tokyo Olympics. Why? Because the country refused to condemn the apartheid. The ban on South Africa lasted until 1992. The apartheid regime killed around 8,500 people between 1984 and 1990. China must have killed double the number of Uyghurs, or triple, or more, who knows? And powerful bodies like the IOC don't seem to care. Forget making China pay. The International Olympics Committee is helping China sports wash. Is it because China is too powerful or too loaded? In 1964, the same Olympics Committee banned teams that took part in the 1963 Games of the new emerging forces. In the 2000 Sydney Games, the IOC banned Afghanistan for discriminating against women. And now the same IOC has suddenly turned blind to China's crimes. It won't cancel the Games even after China went after one of IOC's own Olympians. It is in fact defending China, saying that Peng Shuai is safe. The IOC may selectively be blind/spineless, but you and I are not. Heads of state and heads of government should not be either. They can come together to boycott these genocide games, come together to take this campaign forward. Former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has thrown his weight behind the call for a boycott. This is what Pompeo has said. The CCP has disappeared reporters writing about Wuhan virus, doctors telling the truth about CCP labs, a professional tennis player, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, the head of Interpol. Let's disappear the Olympics from them and hold it in a place the world can be proud of. Hashtag boycott Beijing Olympics. Mike Pompeo is right. A country that does not respect sports stars cannot be allowed to host the world's most prestigious sporting event. China does not deserve that kind of respect, and you know what? It's not often that the world has such a leverage against China. The genocide games are our chance to make China pay for the Wuhan virus, for the death of more than 5 million innocent people, for expansionism in the South China Sea, for forced disappearances. The world should make China pay for its human rights abuses by boycotting the genocide games. There is precedent. There are enough and more reasons. All the world now needs is some willpower. To Russia now. Is it preparing to invade Ukraine? That question is getting bigger by the day, as is the number of Russian troops near the Ukrainian border. an estimated 100,000 troops have been stationed here. 100,000 Russian troops at the border. There's no obvious reason for this build-up, no upcoming military exercise, no seasonal troop rotation. So what is Moscow up to? The US says this build-up is for a large-scale push into Ukraine, an invasion from multiple locations. This is what American intel suggests. It says Putin is considering an invasion next year with a total of 100 battalion tactical groups that could cross into Ukraine from Crimea, Russia and Belarus. So what's a battalion tactical group? It is a temporary military formation of several battalions, along with attached artillery, air defense, engineering and logistical support units. The US says these groups are planning to enter Ukraine, occupy an extensive territory and stay there for several months, even years. The intel also suggests that Moscow has called up reservists to take part in this operation. Now, these are members of Russia's reserve force. How many of them? Tens of thousands, apparently, a scale unprecedented in the post-Soviet era. What will these reservists do? Their role would be to secure territory as Russian battalions advance. Does this mean that war is certain now? Well, honestly, it's hard to tell. The build-up is certainly worrisome, but like I said, Russia's motives are still unclear. This could be typical Russian posturing for you, and not the first of its kind. Moscow has a history of such brinkmanship, of such build-ups along Ukraine's border that lead to nothing. In fact, Russia did something similar as recently as April this year. So is this a repeat? Here's what America's top decision-makers think.
The truth is, Bob, we're not sure exactly what Mr. Putin is up to. But these movements certainly have our attention, and I would urge Russia to be more transparent about what they're up to and to take steps to live up to the Minsk agreements.
We don't know what President Putin's intentions are, but we do know what's happened in the past. We do know the playbook of trying to cite some illusory provocation from Ukraine or any other country, and then using that as an excuse to do what Russia is planning to do all along.
That was the American assessment. What about Russia? What is the Kremlin saying? It is accusing the US and its allies of the same provocation. It says Russia's actions are only in response to NATO aggression, to the activities of NATO ships in the Black Sea, the presence of British soldiers in Ukraine, and NATO's political and military build-up along Russian borders. Such, and I'm quoting, such unconventionally sly situations require unconventionally decisive actions. Listen to this.
What is happening now in the world's diplomacy had never happened before. That's why there's been a lot of slyness, desperate to explain something, and against the backdrop of public accusation of Moscow inaction, such a stunning step has been made. Yes, it's unconventional for diplomacy, but from the other side, such unconventionally sly situation requires unconventionally decisive actions. Ukraine likely pursued military solution of their problem to create war disaster for themselves and everyone in Europe. This is what Ukraine tends to achieve, and it is trying to achieve it under the shelter of NATO exercise. NATO ship in the Black Sea, British soldiers in the region with numbers increasing. That is what Ukraine wants to achieve. And this is, of course, heartbreaking because this will entail serious consequences.
There will be serious consequences, says Russia. How serious? Is Moscow really in a position to invade Ukraine? Well, I don't think so. Ukraine is the largest country in Europe besides Russia. It is bigger than Germany, France and Poland. Plus, its military, too, is the third largest in Europe. Entering Ukraine and merging it into Russia is not going to be easy. Neither would it be feasible for President Vladimir Putin. Let me show you why. These are Ukrainian troops carrying out assault drills in response to Russia's troop deployment. This footage was released today. It shows that Ukraine is no longer an obsolete force. Its skills and equipment have improved since the 2014 annexation of Crimea. Ukraine is prepared to counter Russian aggression, and it has support from the US and NATO if things come to that. So the bottom line is this: Russia may or may not be preparing for an invasion, but it's certainly trying to flex its muscle, amp up its military presence at Ukraine's border and use it as a coercive leverage against the NATO. The story is still developing. We'll keep track. And besides Ukraine, Europe has another thing to worry about at the moment: a massive surge in Wuhan virus infections across Europe. The fifth wave has hit the continent. Several countries have ordered lockdowns and restrictions yet again. The move has led to violent protests in many parts of Europe. Thousands of protesters took to the streets this weekend across Europe. Law enforcement agencies are struggling to contain their anger. Our next report tells you what's driving Europe's latest Wuhan virus surge.
It looked as if a bomb went off. This is The Hague in the Netherlands. Over the weekend, these streets looked like a war zone. Bicycles were set on fire. Protesters were everywhere, and riot police was scrambling to bring the situation under control. They weren't the only ones who were struggling. Across Europe, similar scenes were playing out. Thousands of protesters were out on the streets in Croatia, Austria and Belgium. In fact, in Brussels, water cannons were used to push back the crowds. All these Europeans are angry about the same thing: Wuhan virus restrictions. Lockdowns are being reimposed across Europe. New infections are soaring. Almost every day now, more than 300,000 new cases are being found. Around 350 tests per 100 people are coming back positive. The death toll has risen by 10%. The fifth wave is hitting Europe, and the peak might still be far away.
As we are progressing into the winter season, we are seeing that COVID-19 infections and rates are on the rise in almost all the member states. And the bulk of patients in intensive care are the unvaccinated.
Anti-vaxxers are driving up new infections in Europe, as well as these protests on the streets. Countries like Austria imposed mandatory vaccination rules, but the move has led to public backlash. Leaders are being called dictators for asking people to take a Wuhan virus vaccine.
I want my freedom back. One would think we live in a democracy, but now this is a coronavirus dictatorship.
I'm here because I believe it's wrong to classify a healthy human being as a danger who has to undergo tests all the time, when in fact it's not as dangerous as they say.
Who is driving this campaign against vaccination? The right-wing politicians. They are stoking this fire for political gains. Who are these politicians? One of them is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent anti-vaccine campaigner and the nephew of former U.S. President John F. Kennedy. Recently, he joined an anti-vaccine protest in Milan. Kennedy addressed around 7,000 protesters. He attacked the Green Pass, a mandatory vaccination certificate that every worker now needs in Italy. Kennedy said the Green Pass is an attack on the rights of Italians.
All of these rights that were taken away from us, these governments said it was temporary. It was only 2 weeks. It would be over. In truth, you can all see what's happening. They are taking those rights and they will never give them back unless we make them.
Campaigns like this one began in a few pockets of Europe, but they are spreading across the region now with the Wuhan virus. If Europe is serious about crushing the latest surge, it should start battling the misinformation against vaccines. Bureau Report, World is One.
In Pakistan, large-scale protests have erupted in Gwadar, necessary security measures imposed by Islamabad. Before I tell you what's happening on the ground in Gwadar, we must discuss why Gwadar is critical. This is a port city in South Pakistan, situated in the volatile Balochistan province. This city features heavily in the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now, China considers Gwadar a jewel in its CPEC crown. It's a link between China's BRI and the Maritime Silk Road. Basically, the showpiece project of China's Belt and Road Initiative. That's what Gwadar is. China built it with a compliant Pakistan agreeing to all conditions. What China did not account for was the people of Gwadar. They are vehemently against the CPEC. They suspect that it would turn their city into the very embodiment of a security state. The current protests are part of this growing backlash. Thousands have hit the streets. They oppose Chinese investments and the steps being taken by the Pakistan government to quell dissent. The protesters want Islamabad to remove unnecessary checkpoints, to remove illegal fishing trawlers and to reopen routes leading up to Iran. The protests have been on for a week now. Leading them are local political parties, civil rights activists and local fishermen. These protests are also being attended by school children. They're marching along with their parents, asking the government to install more teachers, not checkpoints. That's what they're saying, more teachers, not checkpoints. It's a slogan aimed at ending the heavy security presence in Gwadar. Since 2016, Pakistan has deployed several guarded convoys, checkpoints and troops in the city. They've essentially turned Gwadar into a fortress for China. Billions of dollars worth of Chinese investments are at stake here. Pakistan clearly does not want to take any chances. But in the process of securing these Chinese investments, Islamabad daily life in Gwadar a struggle. And that's an understatement. The residents cannot step out without IDs. They are frisked at almost every checkpoint. They're arrested on mere suspicion. And as if to add to their misery, the government has issued licenses to Chinese trawlers. They're fishing in the waters off the coast of Gwadar. The result is this: the livelihood of local fishermen has been ruined. Their small boats matched to giant Chinese trawlers. All these factors combined has led to the current protests, not to mention the fact that all the Chinese money and investment that has come in has done nothing for the people of Balochistan. These jobs are not for them. This infrastructure is not for them. According to Maulana Hidayatul Rahman, the man leading this current protest, Islamabad's measures account for a crackdown. This is what he says. It's an insult, he says, for the soil when they are stopped at checkpoints and inquired about their whereabouts. Then he goes on to say, if the government ignores us, we will block entire highways, expand our protest across Balochistan, even stop CPEC work in the coming days. This is a direct warning to Islamabad and an indirect message to China. The situation could escalate any minute. In the past, Baloch insurgent groups have used such protests as an excuse to target Chinese projects and personnel. In August 2018, 3 Chinese engineers were severely wounded after a suicide bomber attacked their bus. Then in May 2019, the insurgents stormed a hotel in Gwadar where Chinese delegations usually stay. 2 security agents who worked for China were injured in this attack. And just 3 months back, in August, a suicide bomber attacked a motorcade carrying Chinese engineers. At least 1 Chinese national was injured in this attack. Now, Balochistan has been gripped by unrest again. Warnings are being issued against Chinese projects. For Imran Khan, who is fresh out of a political slugfest, if he's out, this is an additional challenge and a very tough one to tackle. Now let's talk about Tesla. The world's most valuable car maker is facing allegations of rampant sexual harassment. They concern a Tesla factory in Fremont, in California. A 38-year-old employee at this factory has said that she was subjected to catcalling and sexual assault by her colleagues for 3 years, something that she says her supervisors and Tesla's HR department paid no heed to. So now she's gone ahead and sued the company and accused its CEO Elon Musk of fueling such wrongful acts at the workplace through his conduct. Here's a report.
It is the world's most valuable car maker, more valuable than the next top 6 companies combined. but it may have failed in enforcing some important values at its workplace, like respecting women. Tesla has been accused of rampant sexual harassment by a woman employee. Her name is Jessica Barraza, a 38-year-old production associate who worked at a Tesla factory in Fremont, California. Last week, Barraza filed a lawsuit claiming that she was subjected to constant harassment, like catcalling and inappropriate physical touching by her employees. Barraza has claimed that nearly every day for 3 years, my female co-workers and I were objectified, threatened, touched and propositioned on the factory floor. I felt degraded, humiliated and traumatized. The lawsuit further alleges that supervisors and managers at the Fremont factory were not just aware of such pervasive harassment, but also participated in abusive behavior. Did the company know about this? The lawsuit claims that the victim filed several internal complaints, but Tesla's Human Resource Department did nothing to address them. Instead, it disabled an email address meant for filing such complaints. The allegations are shocking, but they're hardly surprising. Tesla has a history of up workplace harassment, especially at its factory in Fremont. A factory that has been identified as a predator zone in several routes. In February 2017, another woman employee had sued Tesla for pervasive harassment at the Fremont plant. How did the company respond? By firing her for what it said were false accusations. Then in 2017, a black employee at the Fremont plant had accused his supervisors of racial harassment. For once, the charges were upheld. Tesla was ordered to pay $137 million in damages. Now another employee at the same factory has raised allegations of inappropriate behavior. Something that she says flows from the top. Right from the CEO, Elon Musk. Yes, the victim has claimed that Musk does not set a good example for his employees through his sexually suggestive tweets. She has cited a recent one to make her point. This tweet from October 21st. Musk joked about starting a new university dubbed the Texas Institute of Technology and Science. A name which many deduced as a crude acronym for a female body part. The victim claims that such irresponsible tweets from the boss are fueling a culture of misogyny and objectification of women employees at the workplace. Tesla abolished its public relations department last year and is yet to respond to the allegations. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
You must have heard what happened in Wisconsin today. An SUV plowed into a Christmas parade. It ran over a group of 20 people. Some of them were young dancers. The images are terrifying.
I heard and saw the people being hit, but what you could do more than seeing is hearing, and just that sound was insane.
It happened so suddenly and so quick, and the truck came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you just hear the sound of people getting hit.
The incident killed 5 people. On a regular day, it would be branded an attack. Blamed on Islamic terror perhaps, or lone wolves. But this incident is not being openly called an attack. Do you know why? Because the US may have itself to blame. The suspect in this case is a black man in his late 30s. His name is Darrell E. Brooks. He's reportedly a supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement. In the past, Brooks has reportedly been vocal about George Floyd. George Floyd, as most of you would remember, was a black man who died after a white police officer knelt on his neck. So why is Brooks' association with BLM relevant here? It's because he ran over a Christmas parade just 3 days after a white teenager walked out free after killing 2 men during BLM protests. Which brings us to Kyle Rittenhouse. His case begins in August 2020. A black man called Jacob Blake is shot at by a white cop. 7 bullets hit Blake. He's left paralyzed waist downwards. The incident takes place in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The BLM supporters take to the streets around the United States in protest. Rittenhouse is all of 17. He lives in Illinois. On the 25th of August, he travels to Kenosha and he's not alone. Rittenhouse brings along a firearm with 30 rounds of bullets. He fires at BLM protesters. The bullets hit 3 men, 2 die. The entire episode is caught on camera. Look at this. So Rittenhouse is picked up after this, what you just saw, charged with first reckless homicide, endangering safety and attempted intentional homicide, possession of a dangerous weapon and failure to comply with an emergency order. If found guilty, Rittenhouse is to spend his whole life in prison. If not found guilty, Rittenhouse becomes the latest emblem of American injustice. So 1 year and a closely followed trial later, the jury finds Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty of all counts. Once an accused, Rittenhouse walks out a hero. How does that even work? Things like this are only possible in America, you could say. Wisconsin allows people to use deadly force in self-defense. Now, self-defense and violence are 2 very different things. Rittenhouse provoked violence, but guess what? Wisconsin allows that too. Even violence is legal in America if the person has quote-unquote exhausted every reasonable force to escape from or otherwise avoid death or great bodily harm. Rittenhouse said that he acted in self-defense, so he got away with the crime. What was the teenager defending himself against? Well, that Wisconsin fails to answer. The state's law is such that the burden was on the prosecution to prove otherwise, to prove that Rittenhouse was not acting in self-defense. When he left for Kenosha in August last year, Rittenhouse said that he wanted to protect property, volunteer as a medic. The teenager was not even qualified for any of that. What about the military-style assault rifle that he was carrying? Should he even have access to something like this? Wisconsin prohibits a person under 18 from possessing a dangerous weapon. Rittenhouse was 17 then, but apparently the weapon he was carrying, the rifle you see on your screen, was not dangerous enough. Says who? The length of the firearm's barrel, believe it or not, the gun would have been prohibited had the barrel been a couple of inches shorter. This firearm, the one that Rittenhouse carried, can be used by teens for hunting. This boy did not kill a raccoon. He killed humans. And he got away with it. Courtesy America's justice system. It's riddled with loopholes and past injustices. Reports say during the closing arguments, Rittenhouse's lawyer cited the Jacob Blake case. Like I said, the man was shot at 7 times. Despite that, the police officer who shot at Blake did not lose his job. So here's what Rittenhouse's lawyer said. Other people in this community have shot people 7 times and it's been found to be okay. And my client did it 4 times in 3/4 of a second to protect his life. What if the police officer was black? What if his victim was white? What if Rittenhouse was black? Would they have not got justice in a white majority state? Reports say the judge was not too conscious about his biases. When he delivered the verdict, Rittenhouse shook his head. Outside the court, cars honked in celebration. America's justice system had delivered an injustice again. Legal experts were not surprised by what happened. Protests were ready. And 3 days later, a black man ran over a Christmas parade. Do you see a possible connection here? America has no one but itself to blame for such incidents, for laws that allow teenagers to carry military assault rifles, kill people, and get away with it, for laws that deliver injustice. Those killed while protesting the injustice in Blake's case have also been denied justice. It's a scary cycle, one of the many things that's wrong with 21st century America. Think about it. We are wrapping the show, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.
Del inicio de la Revolución Mexicana.
El ejército, criadero militar. Mi nombre
tiene por objeto
obligando a los federales.
¡Viva México!
El plan de Ayala.
esta tierra.